Well, hello everyone. This is Matt Orozco from Macabre Daily here. I'm so excited to be joined by Ariel Vida, who is the director and co-writer of Trim Season, which is coming out June 7th, I believe, in theaters and
Mhm.
on VOD. So, Ariel, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much yeah, I'm excited to spend the morning with you.
Oh, well, same here. Well, I know we don't have too much time, so I'll dive right into some questions. And the first one is, I was really entranced by Trim Season, visually speaking. And I was curious to know kind of, as I thought more about where this story might have come from, I noticed it was actually written or adapted from another story. So I was curious how you came across the Trim Season story.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so glad that visually that because that's my, that hyper realistic stylized, like it just everything. Everyone who's worked with me for the past 10 years, it's like that's the default. You're running into people who are like, I don't want to touch fantasy. I don't want to. And I was like, I don't want to see anything that looks like what I could regularly see. I want to escape. I want to be somewhere else. But the whole team, I feel like it was kind of a synchronous at the same time that Shawnee DeMott, one of our the executive producer, he was talking to his friends Colin and Megan. You mentioned the story by credits. They worked in the industry, and Megan was actually a former, had trimmed, um, and they had been throwing around, probably, regular hangouts of what a rich world it would be like for not only a horror but something supernatural in that location. Uh i i keep telling everyone who I'm like, when I'm catching up with, I was like, not that with Jane obviously as the baddie, if it was just like Jane plus like a bowling league, like sign me up.
Yeah.
But the fact that they were developing this in Humboldt County in northern California, talking about that super isolated, there's no cell service, you're hearing mountain lions, you're hearing gunfire, all these even human threats, natural threats, but after 16 hours of smoking while trimming, that like elevated sense. And Shawnee had worked with Jane on a movie called The Free Fall with Adam Stillwell and actually Mark Center as well. So they had already been talking about something for Jane to sink her teeth into. How do you live up to V, like what
Right.
the standards of what her next delicious baddie would be. And just, yeah, like perfect kismet that Colin and Megan and Shawnee's discussion about, okay, we had Murder Mountain come out on Netflix, we have all these true crime documentaries, but where's the really heightened supernatural version of that? And Jane looking for that perfect role, developed with then David Blair, obviously he's the super talented screenwriter. They had worked with together to make this script, which is what I got in late 2020. Trying, I was trying still to do production design to pay the bills, but finishing my first feature in the height of the pandemic. You have no festivals to premiere at. Like, it was just obviously a very weird time. And they had seen a rough cut of Vide Noir, of my first film. A friend, Justin Ross, amazing producer, put it across the radar somehow. I'm so grateful. Like, they saw, they're like, oh, super trippy indie horror girl, or something. And but Jane is in Australia. Everyone's in different time zones, and we started having Zooms about like what this could look like, even with all of this is pre-vaccine. We didn't know if we would shoot in the States or maybe in Europe. We're trying to throw all this stuff out there. But it was just so with Jane already on board, with having that North Star of like, here's our Mona, how are we filling this world? Um, yeah, it was just rewriting little tweaks as we were putting in, like, we're shooting at this, we'll have this is the final, this will be the final set piece, this location. We had, as we're so lucky, it's like Beth Million, Alex Essoe, Bex Sealer Cloth, Ally Ioannides, and Juliet Kendall Fauci. Is like, when we had our trimmers, that dictated so much of like, you know, let's make this as real as possible. Everything around Mona's puppet show relies on these people feeling so real and beautiful. So, via Zoom, we're rewriting, these character interactions to really breathe life into, the people that we're bringing on board. And I just still can't believe, with schedules and with COVID and transport, it's like that we had the cast we had is insane. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, I mean, and everyone, I really, I was as I was watching it, one thing that kind of stood out is one, it felt like it was really trying to embrace the authenticity of something that isn't talked about as much, which is really the idea that there is a predatory aspect in some cases of this trimming business and how it
Mhm.
does prey upon people who are kind of vulnerable or looking for money and need it quick. And I was curious to know like how much of some of the facts that were dropped around things like, do they typically only take women or non-binary or
Mhm.
queer people as kind of trimmers because they tend to be less dramatic? Like, is how much of that was kind of informed by the experience versus how much it was kind of added in as part of to make the narrative a little bit more exciting or engaging?
Thank you. No, I'm glad. I really am extremely glad that that's what rang true, because that is what I knew when they gave me the script and it was, witch weed, all of that fun, all the stylistic bulbs are popping off with, Guillermo del Toro and, how do you do this trippy forest stuff. But I definitely didn't know much about the nature, of the industry. So before I could even go up, Katie Simon, the production designer, and I, we went up to these farms. But as soon as I was diving in, I mean, I think before we even went to the farms, I was very aware of the fact that with, post both legalization and decriminalization, in different
Right.
areas, that I mean, unfortunately, like a lot of industries, it's like you can say like, oh, well, it's, now you have dispensaries everywhere, but like who, even just the means to buy the permits to do the things, it's just like, okay, well, who is profiting and who is still, even just the mass incarceration of like why were these laws even just like enacted in the first place, by the Reagan administration? Like why was this corrupted in the place in the way that it was in the first place? And now everyone's, excited, oh, things are, legal. But who is raking in the money from, from this? There's amazing entrepreneurs trying to put, women in different marginalized communities and women of color in, positions of power in, farms and dispensaries. And it's like, but so much of that is based on funds, who can
Right.
afford these different things. And that's, a lot of straight
It's very
white men,
exclusive.
you know. So yeah, it's like easier said than done, obviously, to celebrate this, like, oh well, it's all fine now and you can just go down the street and buy this. But the who is able to profit off of that, who is still, in jail and disproportionately, arrested for these things. It's like, even if we knew we were doing such a surreal, heightened universe with the witch, I was like, this would be, we're not making up like a cyberpunk dystopian drug. Even
Right.
I'm saying future, but even with, V Noir, it was, and that was, again, such a blast as a first time feature, with like stylistic, period film things. But this is a real, I was like, this is profoundly disrespectful if we play in these real towns and these real industries and we're not addressing, we have the fantastical element of a witch who's in control. We can't not address then, who actually is, like, who's inheriting her farm,
Right.
who is she exploiting? Because like, yeah, you asked like which was, what was the actual real elements. And I think it's Harriet Ally Ioannides is saying, like, oh, they have women that they don't feel like could revolt or take over. And there is so much uh, exploiting not just women but also, immigrants and, women of color, and who is coming to just try to make money under the table to bring home to families. And if then a farm owner refuses to pay or something, it's like they would hire these women because, especially if they're non-local, it's like, well, I don't want your boyfriend coming in the middle of the night and knowing where my farm is.
Right.
So it's like that sounds bad to be like the best case scenario then is at least you're getting your cash and going home, which is still just like the worker conditions in that inherently are already, like hugely problematic. But the amount of times then if they just like didn't pay or underpay, these trimmers don't have any recourse, so they're giving, they would give up an entire month, travel everything to come up. And to say that, like, well, the best you can hope for is your horrible cabin and horrible living expenses, like, or living experience, that like at least you'll get some cash in your 1 week shower when they drive you to Garberville. So when you're saying like, oh, it's a switch and she's controlling people in this supernatural way, but strip lot all away and you still have, it's like you have, these men who run the farms, and it's like this is the women's work. You're inside, the men will cut the stalks and the women will trim. And if we pay you properly or not is your problem. And then
Right.
to say like, okay, well, it's legalized, but you need XYZ, privilege to actually have it makes sense from, the health perspective of the amount of, we have to test your water, we have to have this, we have to be able to track everything back. But all of that, even if someone could prove that their farm hit every single marker, it's so much like any industry, even like filmmaking. You'd be like, "Well, just go out and make a movie," and someone could be like, "Oh, well, I made this with a ton of money." So to be like, "Oh,
Right.
why won't these different women or marginalized communities just why can't you just get your farm? Why don't you have a thriving dispensary in Los Angeles?" It's because,
It's the
that's a
bootstrap
huge,
argument, right?
yeah,
Like just
the
clear out your
financial
bootstraps.
barrier, yeah, like who, getting in that room. So there's a lot of amazing people, like working towards that, but it's just so easy for people to be like, I'm just so glad that I can, like, smoke in a park now. And it's like, but who's profiting off these, where you buy your, joints to go to the park, and who's still in jail is like, I don't feel like you can't make this movie even super stylized, witchy surrealism without touching on that. Like it would just be really irresponsible.
And I applaud you for doing so because I think it's very easy to take this kind of the half-baked route where you're just like trying to almost make fun of and use it as a basis for comedy. And there's certainly some inherent kind of funniness to the interactions and the characters, but it never kind of goes beyond the point of washing over the fact that there is a human cost to
Thank
part
you.
of this. And at the same time, there is also this element that people are so excited to see. You talked about how picking up kind of people that don't have a lot of connection to others, and they even address that with Allie, right? How
Mhm,
who's going to tell her mom and all of that. It comes through as
mhm.
like the very real concern that I don't think a lot of people put towards that. And I think the last question I have for you is just more of kind of a fun one, is around, if you were going to program a double feature, let's say Trim Season is one of them. What's the other film you want to program with Trim Season to appear?
That is such a good question. Oh my god. Wow. No, that's sorry. I was just like, "Oh, that's, like, such a good." I was like, do, like, a total palette refresher and just be like, "Follow it up with RR," so that people are just, like, having a great time when they go home and they're not feeling bad. But
Yeah,
I think in that, like, heady horror night, if someone was saying, different horror references, and maybe it I don't know, I was like, maybe this is me being so, again, in that, like, fantastical, surrealism world, but, like, Guillermo del Toro was such a huge influence that I don't know if it's better or worse for me for it to be first or last, but I feel like to be like Pan's Labyrinth of,
ugh,
again, like how do you even, that's what I'm like, is it even disrespectful like to say, because it's like why to do a double feature, but like that kind of taking this real, a historical moment and having these real, like so much of the pain that people are going through, in that film is rooted to, a particular time and place. And what we attempted, at least obviously, it's like to have, like, how can you have something be so stylized but still just, ball over these people's, circumstances, even if then you're going to a gilded golden, rose tinted world at times. So I feel like that's the like, wow, best case scenario, like what would I do for like a Q&A anywhere in the vicinity of, of him. But yeah, that I feel like that would be my, I guess, first
I'd see
first
that.
thought, even if it's lofty, is like, Del Toro is like the being, yeah, being in the woods and that kind of, and also I guess just the coping, there's the, I guess, more coping mechanisms in that of, what is real and what is, and what is fantastical versus the drug element of this. But I think a similarity that I was going for is still like not to have it arbitrary, not to have like, well, we're doing a fun lens effect because it's fun, because it's weird and trippy. It's just like, well, what is it actually, in Pan's Labyrinth? Like, how is it from, a child's perspective, or in Trim Season, like, how would this be through the lens of being really high? So these, fears, whether it's paranoia, Emma going through, not literally not having anyone or know what to do next, and the prospect of money just being like, I'm just going to go after this. It's like, how do you make sure that that backbone feels so real, but then if you throw anything larger than life at it, you still know who your people are and who matters to them. Her mother, Emma's best friend. It's like, then when you bring, if anything happens to Ophelia's mother, or to Emma's best friend, it's like that's the root of it. Like all the fantastical elements aside, like are you in love with, and is your heart bleeding for these people, and the responsibility of these being real situations and not just like TBD future, TBD time, TBD magical powers. I was like, this is real time, real place, real legislature, real people still suffering. Like, we can have a lot of fun with the horror movie, but like, we can't not address these things.
Horror is such a great template for that too, to be able to combine the
Yeah,
societal and along with the supernatural to create a compelling
yeah.
narrative. And I just want to say again, Ariel, this has been like Trim Season is an outstanding film, and I hope a lot of folks go to see it. It is. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone because it does offer us up so many great surprises along the way. But it's absolutely not what it seems when you look at it, and it is so much better than I think. Than what we deserve right now in this moment, especially with legislation changing. So, Ariel, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I just remind everybody that you can go and see Trim Season this Friday, June 7th. To be available in various theaters, limited release. If you can't catch it in theaters, please go see it on VOD. And you will be putting up our review in the next couple of days here. So, Ariel, good luck with the rest of the interviews and looking forward to whatever you create next.
Thank you so much. That literally, I can't tell you how much that means to me.
All right. Well, hello, fiends, friends, and familiars. This is Matt Orozco from Macabre Daily, and I'm so excited to be joined by Alex Essoe, who is one of the stars of Trim Season, which you can see in theaters this Friday, June 7th, or also on demand. Alex, thanks so much for taking some time to speak with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm happy to be here with you, and I know we don't have too much time, so I just wanted to dive right into things with a few questions.
Please, yeah.
I have the benefit of having just had a chance to speak with Ariel, so I have a little bit of insight into the process of the filmmaking. But I was curious to know when you were approached for the role of Julia, how much of what we see on screen is what was in the script versus how much of it was something that you brought to the table, kind of as a in the moment or as you got to know the character better.
Well, it's a good question because we kind of walk both lines. We stuck to the script pretty faithfully. A lot of improvising would be kind of just between the characters interacting socially. Um, but there really wasn't a need to stray too far from the script, the way it was written. My job is to bring life to a character in such a way that it serves the script. So, yeah, that's I hope that's a good answer.
No, absolutely. I mean, and again, I think I have a bit of a cheat sheet because having just spoken with Ariel, kind of have a sense that there was a bit of kind of on the fly formulation of characters and script, but it all doesn't, none of that appears in the final product. It all seems very well calculated. And, I know you're no stranger to the genre, right? You've been in films like The Pope's Exorcist, a personal favorite, Starry Eyes, and
Yeah.
also Midnight Mass. So I'm curious to know how your other genre work has kind of informed the characters you continue to play, and especially one like Julia, who's a little different than some of your other characters in that she has a bit of a secondary role to Emma.
Yeah, she's there to support Emma, that's her whole purpose in the film. Genre, I mean, it's funny because, you when you train to be an actor, the idea is to, you know, be able to kind of develop to a point where, I mean, the idea ideally is that you can play whatever is put in front of you.
Right.
Um, and I will say one nice thing about doing genre work is that you do get a lot more variety, and generally you get a much more of a challenge. So it kind of forces you to use a lot of the stuff that you learn and employ a lot of your training. I've been lucky in the sense that I rarely am cast to just play like the girl. I've been very lucky that, I've been offered characters with some dimension to them. And I felt the same way with Julia. I mean, she is a pothead, yes, but at the same time, um, she's also
Great friend.
she's also like a well, she is. I mean, she she carries a lot of guilt with her for kind of encouraging them to go on this adventure in the first place. and you know, it was interesting to explore the kind of up and downs of her and Emma's relationship. And I love Beth desperately. It was so easy to play her best friend because she's incredibly charming and lovely and very talented. And I really hope I get a chance to work with her again.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the dynamics on screen again, they don't feel like there's acting or going on. It does feel like every character feels very lived in and real and
Yeah.
grounded. You know, and I think you
Hmm.
have such a good cast of characters that kind of
Oh,
bring different experiences, right? You know, you have
fantastic cast.
Ally, who's kind of this, you know, nomadic granola adventurer. But then you have kind
Yeah,
of your
but
more
at the same
professional.
time, like super judgmental and scathing.
Yeah, and you know, I found her brashness
It's so
almost
good.
interesting. You know, it's like kind of
Oh,
like
it's so good.
the friend who says the wrong thing at the wrong time every time, but makes everyone
Yeah.
laugh. You know, it's kind of like
Yeah, and
that was
like
her.
doesn't care about saying the wrong thing either.
Yeah,
Like it's not a lack of awareness, it's that she's kind of a chaotic person. Wait, I thought I really loved working with Ally. I thought her choices were so strong.
and I think again, I think the entire cast kind of works on all cylinders to really deliver what is a very intimate but also very close
Mhm.
understanding of the ins and outs of an industry that many people probably don't know a lot about aside from like what they
Yeah.
see like at dispensaries and what they read in the
Mhm.
news, but don't know the human element behind it. And I was, you know, curious to know like how much were you familiar with the cannabis industry prior, like kind of the ins and outs of it prior to going into the trim season filming?
You know, I mean, I worked at a dispensary for a little while, one of the many side jobs I've had. Um and that was about it. You know, I had met, you know, bud trimmers before who would come to kind of sell their wares, and I would talk to them a bit about, you know, what it was like. And it's pretty true to the script, honestly. I mean, even the experiences that some of the veteran girls are talking about are exactly stories I've heard from actual bud trimmers before.
Wow.
So yeah, so it was really cool, very well researched scripts. Um, and I mean, you know, I'm not quite so much now, but I have myself smoked pot for a very long time.
Yeah, I think it's at this day and age, you know, I think we're reaching a point where every generation has probably had a
Oh yeah.
significant representative tried it at least once. But the
Well, now it's like
normalization,
having a beer. Yeah, it's like
yeah, the destigmatization and process legalization of it all
yeah,
has certainly made it. I don't shudder as much as I used to when you know
yeah.
when I spark up a joint or anything like that.
Right,
But
exactly. Yeah, you don't have to look over your shoulder as much.
no, the paranoia is still there, but for all different reasons. And so I'm curious, like last couple of questions for you. Just first one is like, you know, when it came to filming and working in the environment you were all in, what was the most challenging part of that process, but also what was one of the most rewarding parts?
The most challenging? I mean, I don't know. It was a very smooth process for me. Um, Honestly, the most challenging part of the shoot for me was just contending with the elements
Hmm.
because we were like shooting out in the woods. But that, that was really it. I was pretty lucky schedule wise and everything. Um, you know, and everyone was so cool. Definitely one of the best parts of the shoot would be hanging out in the parking lot with all of my fellow castmates at the end of the day. That was really fun. I miss that.
Yeah, it's what I hear a lot from folks when we do these interviews is that some of the most fun parts they find of making the film is actually just the parts where you're hanging out with your cast and your crew
Oh,
in
yeah,
between takes or just
the
after the fact.
camaraderie, man. It's so good, and you know, it was such a great group of people working on this. I just had so much fun.
Well, you know, my last question for you is kind of a fun one. I like to ask everybody, but curious to hear your answer now in comparison to what Ariel mentioned. But if you were asked to program a double feature with Trim Season, what's the other film you would want to
Ooh.
watch or have people have to be programmed along with it?
Oh man, that's such a good question. I'm gonna take another sip of coffee and ruminate on this. Hmm. I don't know. I would probably pair it with like nothing too on the nose. Um, probably I would probably pair it with like Midsummer or something like that.
Oh, it'd be fun.
Yeah, I think the themes are similar, you know,
Yeah,
and they
like
both
women
have
taking
this
back their
kind of
independence.
yeah, and they also have they have these kind of unique sort of fever dream styles to them. Um yeah. I think
I would
yeah,
10 out of 10 see that double feature.
right? I mean, I would definitely need to like go for ice cream or something afterwards and balance
Yeah,
myself out, but yeah.
probably a little intermission between them too, because Midsummer can get a bit long, but um
Yes, and it does not it's relentless. That movie is
yes.
relentless.
It
Yeah.
certainly is. And I again, I think for all those that are watching this, please make it a point to go out and check out Trim Season in the theater. It's definitely
Yes.
not what you're expecting, but it also delivers far more than what you might think.
Oh,
And is there anything else we can expect you in, Alex? I know you've got an IMDb track record of genre work that is the I'm sure the ire and jealousy of many, but is there anything
oh.
else you've got coming up that we can expect from you?
Yes, actually, I'm in a movie that just came out. It's called Last Stop in Yuma County, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's less of a genre. It's more of a kind of. It really has this sort of '90s kind of grindhouse feel to it. It's very. I'm super proud of it. It's by this director named Francis Galuppi, and actually, a fun fact about this, they're making a documentary about this, but his producer actually sold his house to pay for the movie.
Wow. The last stop
Yeah.
in Yuma is he sold his house for that.
Yeah. Last
Wow.
Stop in Yuma County. It's starring Jim Cummings, who's awesome, and Jocelyn Donahue, and Richard Brake is in it, and he's terrifying.
I mean, he just looks terrifying when you see him, but he's a
Oh,
sweetheart of a man, but he just has
oh,
this look about him.
the sweetest, but he has that intensity. He's able to like access something very primordial in himself. It's fantastic to watch. So yeah, that I'm super excited for. And yeah, that's about all I can say at the moment.
Well, that's definitely on my radar, and I'm hoping to check it out as soon as I can. And again, for everyone
Nice.
else, please make it a point to go check out Trim Season on June 7th. You can catch it in your theaters. You can catch it at VOD. We'll have our review up at Macabre Daily coming in the next few days. But again, Alex, thank you so much for your time and talking about the film, and also for the great work you've contributed, not just on this piece, but also all of the
Oh,
amazing genre work. Again, as I mentioned before,
dude.
Starry Eyes is a huge favorite of mine. I even got the
Oh,
Waxwork record behind me somewhere. So
oh, nice. That's a great record.
it is great, moody soundtrack. And again,
Yeah.
something to expect here in Trim Scene as well, that kind of weird, ethereal, trippy
Yeah, kind of
horror vibe.
synthy. Yeah, totally. Well, dude, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, man.
My pleasure. Thank you, Alex.
Have a good one.
Hello, fiends, friends, and familiars. This is Matt Orozco from Macabre Daily, and I am so excited to be joined by Ally Ioannides, here part of the cast of Trim Season, which is releasing in theaters June 7th, also on VOD. Ally, thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy to speak with you. I've been fortunate enough to speak with both Alex and Ariel so far. And spoiler alert, big fan of the movie. Can't wait to publish our review. But I don't have too much time with you, so I wanted to ask you just a few questions. The first one being, how much of the Harriet character was scripted the way that it's delivered, and how much of this was you bringing your own panache to it, if you will?
Um, that's a great question. Harriet was the only one in the script that didn't have a backstory that they like said out loud, or was like you saw it, or like you see a lot of like Emma's life, and then anyway, like people like literally say their backstories, and Harriet doesn't say anything about
Nope.
where she's from. Like she just has these like snarky remarks. And when I first read it, I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna play this role, because it read to me like a mean girl.
A little bit.
Like a little. I mean, it totally depends. Like you can read something however, but for whatever reason, when I first read it, I was like, this is the like tropey mean girl in the horror movie, whatever. And I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. Like, I don't play these roles. Like, I don't know how to do this. And then I was like, I feel like I'm just gonna do whatever I want. And I don't know where it came from. Like, I started doing this voice and I started saying the lines, and then I started like finding the humor in the lines. And I just had so much fun with it. I don't, yeah. We
You know, it's,
we did some improv too, like all of us.
I mean, it's not a, I mean, it's interesting you're saying this because none of this, it feels like such a fully developed character the way you play her that, you know, it's interesting to hear that it isn't, you know, she kind of comes off as a mean girl, but also she comes off with this kind of ambivalence, this almost lack of awareness of those around her. So she just says what she wants. And it's almost how people, I think, want to be sometimes, but due to social norms, just can't be or won't be.
That's a really interesting point. I love that you got that from her. Yeah, I do think that there's just, she's different than other people. She
Right.
doesn't understand like that she's being rude, or that um she's being stupid or mean, or but I think it's kind of beautiful because I do think that deep down she just wants like friends.
Right.
But yeah, I mean I had so much fun with her.
And it shows up. And I think one of the things that I spoke to both Alex and Ariel about yesterday was that everyone seems to have such a deep connection to their character that it's very easy to kind of get behind them. In fact, you know, your character, there's points in the story where I'm like, oh my goodness, I feel so bad for her despite some of the poor decision making. And I was wondering, you know, given you haven't played a character like Harriet before, was there anything you used to kind of fill out their performance? So were there people or kind of other performances you've seen here, like, you know what, I'm going to take from that and pull that here? Or was it really all just in the moment?
I do actually like sometimes have references that I use, but for this I didn't use anything. I have this character that I do that I developed that I have never done on camera. I just do it for fun. And Harriet kind of came from that a little bit. And then I kind of like wanted to do that. And then I was like, hold on, let me like not cement this and do some research. And then I watched like documentaries on like seasoned trimmers, and I talked to people who have done it just to kind of make sure that I could like develop her in a way that was grounded. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I haven't played a role like this, and I was really nervous for it. Like the first time I ever did it in front of anyone was on set, and I was so scared. I was like, I feel like I'm doing this like crazy voice and this crazy character. And we were all running it. It was like the first day, and I said my first line, and Alex just like burst out laughing. And I was like, so, okay, someone understands it. Like, thank you. And then I honestly think that I found her like during the shoot a lot also, like with everyone else. And yeah.
I mean, it's great to hear you actually spent the time to kind of get to know the industry a little bit, because I think one of the things that shines through really clearly through the story is that it's not just using the cannabis industry kind of as a backdrop for make fun of, or even to kind of use as kind of the butt of a joke. Rather, it really is taking very seriously the fact that this is an industry that profits a lot off of marginalized people. You know, and that while it may be a convenience to everybody else, you know, there's a human cost there. So I think a lot of that, you know, again, comes through. And I'm sure, is it safe to say that the weed facts you were spitting out are all in fact true? Or is there that's a bit of Harrietisms?
I think there's a bit of Harrietisms there. But actually, I mean, I think that she focuses on like the negative stuff, and also loves to say things that you know, that make her sound smart and better than other people because she feels insecure.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has their own insecurity they're hiding in the film, and I think hers is that to be the smarter kind of I know more than you mentality. And you know, to that end, you know, you kind of talked a little bit about kind of how this was the first time, you know, approaching a role like this. So I'm curious to know, was that the most challenging part of this? And if not, what else was challenging? And also, what was the most rewarding part of the production?
I think the most challenging part was honestly giving myself permission to go there and to do something that I hadn't done before, something that was a little bit more charactery, a little bit more comedic. But honestly, like I said, like on set, like the first time I started doing it with people, I just had so much support. Like that's the best part of this movie for me is like, I mean, I've known Ariel for years and I've worked with her not at like on stuff she's PD'd. And she's just like the best person ever. And she cast the shit out of this movie because like everyone in this movie I love so much. And I made good friends that I still do and see. And yeah, we would just like all of the trimmers, we would just like riff and talk about our characters and laugh about them and like joke around. And yeah, that was the best part. It was so fun. I felt like I was like actually like acting and creating something, you know, and like TV and film can be so fast and so just like say your line and say it this way. But I think we all wanted it to be more than that.
I would say it is, but I'm very biased because I like the movie. So obviously, you know, my opinion with grains of salt. But I think my last question for you is going to be around kind of the, you know, and it's a bit of a strange one. Like if you were to program a double feature with this, with Trim Season, what's the movie that you would program it with?
Oh man, that's such a good question. And I don't have an answer for you, but that's such a good question. Oh man. I honestly feel like you could do it with like a more like funny stoner movie. I feel like that would be fun. Yeah, I don't know which one. I'm curious what other people said.
Oh my goodness, I'm trying to remember what
Or
Ariel
like,
and
do
Alex
you
said.
have one that you?
You know, me personally, I would actually put Suspiria in there because I feel like it gives off a
Like the
lot of the same
original?
color. Yeah, the original Dario Argento one, because I think the color scheme and the use of color in particular to heighten the mood is a perfect kind of parallel to also some of the supernatural elements in the movie. That's where I would go,
That's
but
sick.
also I'm kind of a strange, like trippy movie guy. So, you know, give me the weirder the better. That's where I tend to err towards.
Yeah. That would be a crazy night watching Trim Season in Suspiria.
You know what? I'm not above programming it myself for just a double feature once I can rewatch Trim Season again. So you know, if you ever do come up with another double feature you're thinking of, I'm always keen to hear it. But Ally, I want to just say thank you for taking the time to talk about Trim Season with me today. And a reminder to everybody that's listening and watching this, please make it a point to get out to your theaters and go and see it. And if you can't make the theater, it's on VOD. You have no excuse. So thank you so much, Ally.
Thank you. You had amazing questions, and I will let you know if I think of a double feature.
Yeah, if you get up in a cold sweat, you're like, oh, that's the answer to the question Matt was asking. I'll find a way to contact him. But thank you, Ally. Again, this has been a great conversation, and I hope the rest of the press tour goes well.
Thank you so much.